Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Business Unusual interview series. I'm here with Jill Frank, the head of creative agency operations at Allstate, for a part 2 interview. I interviewed Jill Frank back when the pandemic started, over a month before George Floyd's murder, and obviously a lot has transpired. There's a lot more to talk about, and Jill was gracious enough to be willing to chat. So, Jill, thank you so much for that.
Oh, thanks, Jessa. It's exciting to be talking to you again. And holy moly, things have changed rapidly. It's a whole new conversation that we're having, but I feel like a lot of the stuff we talked about last time is even more relevant in this current environment.
Absolutely. And in our first conversation, you mentioned that everybody being at home and this new state of work and state of the world was really putting a spotlight on some of the disparities. And that's only gotten exponentially more true. So you kind of had foresight on how this evolved, which is fascinating to me. So I really wanted to start this conversation just by asking you, like, where should we start? What should we talk about? There's 100 things that we could talk about. So I'll put that ball in your court.
Yeah, it is hard to start to unpack everything that is going on, but I think the great hope and excitement is that we are unpacking it and we're having these conversations, and individuals and communities and corporations and businesses are having these talks. And I think, where might be a good place for us to kind of chat today is something I've really been thinking about, which is just the systems that we've all signed up for that are maybe not serving us anymore, right? And I think we started to touch on that the last time we spoke, in terms of COVID basically just shining a light on injustices or issues that were already inherently there and in our everyday society, but certainly, it's putting stress on an already stressed system. And so, really, I think what this whole social justice movement and reckoning and the opportunity is about saying, hey, wait a minute, like the systems that we've built or that were built for us were not for us. They were not for everybody. They were built with one kind of very specific lens in mind. And so when you look at a system and say, oh, the system's broken, you have to take a step back and think, is the system broken, or is the system producing exactly what it was intended to produce? And if the system's producing what it's intended to produce, and you don't like the outcome of what it's producing, we need a different system, right? Now, then you can get into a whole conversation on what degree of dismantling of a system is necessary to change it, and that is as different as the topic that you speak about. But I think, when you look at what corporations are reckoning with and what businesses are reckoning with, which was happening with COVID and just having everyone work from home, is, how do we really build a workplace that works for our employees, that works for the inclusive set of employees that we want to recruit, right? Like, put a pin in that for a second, and you listen to people saying that, well, we know that diversity is important, but it's really hard to find diverse talent. Or, we've tried and we haven't gotten there, and we haven't cracked the code, or we've got diverse talent in the door, but then they don't stay and we don't know why. And I really think that, again, if we take a step back and look at the system, was the system built for inclusive and diverse talent? And, is capitalism built for inclusive and diverse talent? And, the answer, in my opinion, as it stands right now, is no. And so I think we have a huge opportunity to say, well, wait a minute, do we need to completely rethink and rebuild and create something entirely new? Or can the system that we're operating under be tweaked or be adjusted or be amended, if you will, to produce what it is that we're intending? So I think we do, certainly as a country, as a nation, as a people, but even drilling down and keeping it in the business perspective as a business, like what are you trying to output, right? What's that intentionality coming out? Like, you know, I worked for Oprah for 10 years and everything was always about intention. Every single show started with, what is your intention? And your intention is not always what your goal is. The goal is the metrics. And I think in corporate America, we're always thinking about the metrics, the financials, the KPIs, the ROIs, the blah, 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 blah. And we don't always talk about the intention, because the intention will often get you to your goal and beyond. But the intentionality, when you're unintentional, that's how you end up with the result that you didn't expect. And you say, how did we get here? Or we don't know how to fix it, or it's too insurmountable. And it's like, well, we've got to look at the system. And I think that's where the work for all of us are. And I think, you know, it's very easy to feel like somewhat hopeless right now about, you know, just the enormity of the task at hand. From a global perspective, really, when you have, you know, a global pandemic on top of, you know, social justice epidemic, an epidemic of racism in this country, let alone all the other isms that just aren't getting the spotlight right now. And rightfully so. This is like an important focus that we need to be on. But starting to say, gosh, like where do I fit in, and how do I begin to impact change at the individual personal level? And I think that's where, you know, we could all use a little bit of talk therapy and support.
Yes, for sure. And I think that people who are sitting in a seat of privilege, this may have been a situation that made them more aware that systems are built to actively oppress people and actively work against people. And that awareness and the depth that awareness requires doesn't happen overnight. So like, there's a lot of work to be done there and work to be done in general, but recognizing that we're living in a world of systems, and those systems are not set up correctly, is something that definitely came out of the Black Lives Matter movement already, but it's overwhelming. And I'm wondering, like, when we talk about these things and how like the whole system is backwards and working against people, as an individual, that seems like a big thing to take on. So what can I do to move it? Can I do anything to move it in the right direction, or do I need to work on more of like a corporate level and try to advocate for changes there? Or what do you recommend?
You know, I certainly think that it is a wheel with many spokes, right? So there's no one path that's going to move all of this work forward. It has to be the collective efforts of all of the different spokes of the wheel that ultimately, you know, continues the churn. And so I would just, you know, first and foremost encourage you, or anybody who's kind of wrestling or struggling with, you know, kind of where do I focus my energy, is to, you know, kind of pick a lane, right? Pick a lane where you feel like your, you know, passion for and skill set or expertise or circle of influence can kind of converge, right? And so for some of us, that may look like stepping in and getting more involved, you know, in our, you know, corporate like ERGs or business groups, and simply having the conversations, showing support and starting to influence change in your organization. For people who are, you know, maybe at a mid-level or, you know, entering into leadership positions, that may look like having, you know, one-on-one ripple effect conversations with your direct group saying, hey, are we talking about this enough? Are we doing enough? What is the policy? Because I'm sure what's happening, you know, in a lot of corporations is there's a lot of, and businesses, quite frankly, you know, there's certainly a groundswell from the bottom up. And then there's also kind of like a lot of questioning from leadership down as to like, we know that this is an issue, or we know that this is a problem, and we know we've got to start to solve this. But how do we, right? And so I think sometimes it's like, there's a disconnect between that like groundswell of people who want change and are kind of like, if you think of the boots on the ground, just frankly, millennials and, younger generations maybe have a different perspective than the top down, who has really quite, lived with the system their entire corporate careers. And so, there's got to be a facilitation of the ability for ideas and thinking to be unified across, leadership onto, individuals. The other thing I will say is that, the idea that the system doesn't work is not news to anybody who has been disenfranchised by a system. And so I think what we're also seeing is this like snap on of awareness that the system's not working. And I think you honestly go through the stages of grief, of like denial and anger and trying to search for what does it all mean, finally acceptance, and then it's like, okay, well, what do you do about it, right? And I was just reading that they have kind of recently added a 6th stage of grief, which is meaning. It's like searching for the meaning behind everything is really important. And I do think, we would not be having this social justice movement had everybody not been at home with nothing else to do and talk about and think about. And have not just come off of the realization that the system is broken. Because we saw the system break back in March when we all quarantined and thought, oh gosh, we are not prepared to deal with this. I don't know where I'm sitting. My school shut down. I guess I'm working from home now. I hope my internet is fast enough. You saw us have an agreement of how we were living our lives, and you saw that all get flipped upside down in an instant. And so I don't think, had we not just experienced that and gone through that insight, I don't know that we would have been able to so quickly and astutely as a collective see what happened with George Floyd, to the murder of George Floyd, and say, nope, wrong, system's broken, gotta fix it, need to do something behind the Black Lives Matter movement, like, and it was just unlike anything, with like rapid awareness that the system was broken. And I think, like, I liken it to, like, I lived in LA for a while. I went to college out there, and it's kind of like, when you are Black in this country, it's like living in Chicago with the weather. You check the weather every day to see, is it gonna rain? Is it gonna snow? Is it gonna be 75 and sunny? Do I need sunblock? Do I need a parka? Like, weather is part of your life when you live in Chicago. When you live in Los Angeles, you like get surprised when you feel a raindrop. You're like, the audacity of it to rain today, it's LA. But I kind of feel like, and I'm not trying to make light of race, but when you are Black and when you are a person of color in this country, you're checking that race weather every day. And you're always seeing what's going on. Is my workplace safe? How many people look like me in my workplace? Is what microaggression is going to come my way today? And I think that, what we just did was move a bunch of people from LA to Chicago, where it's like, oh, I got to check the weather. Oh, okay, this is very much happening, and it's a part of, that is the definition of privilege or advantage, when it's something that you don't have to think about, or you can opt out of, right? When you live in LA, you can opt out of really caring about the weather and really kind of being astutely aware, because it's sunny most of the time. So, it's kind of, it's a little bit of a silly analogy, but it just goes to show you how that light bulb like turned on, and it's like, we've been living in Chicago for like hundreds of years. So this is nothing new. This is not a surprise. And this is something that, Black and brown people in this country have been fighting every day, just by existing, on varying levels, certainly. But then, you do have to start to look at, and I'm just thankful that we are starting to unpack systemically, what is systemically wrong with the way that we've stood up, the way that we've accepted how society works, how business works, how family structures work, how education works, how healthcare works. And I think that's the conversation. And I do believe that having that awareness gets you to that next step of starting to ask the questions where you start to see the cracks and start to know what to do with them and what kind of energy to put towards, changing the system and changing the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that analogy. Back when Black Lives Matter movement took center stage again, my friend sent me something similar, and it was, I can't remember who the speaker was, but it was about two fish in the ocean, and one fish swims by the other and says, "How's the water today?" And the other fish says, "What's water?" So it's, you can live within this environment and not even know that it exists. And this has definitely been a perfect storm in terms of everybody being, hyper focused, working from home during a pandemic. And George Floyd's murder was not by any stretch of the imagination, obviously the first of its kind, but it was the first of its kind during a pandemic. And a lot of conversations are happening, and I asked for your advice a couple, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and you gave me the advice you just gave, which is educate yourself, become more aware. And that has been like a thing that I can take on. I'm not capable of turning over the system myself, but like you mentioned, a lot of companies are trying to recruit diversity, but then they don't know how to do that, how to attract diversity, how to get a more diverse population to stay at the company. And you recommended the 3% conference to me, which happened last week. You were a speaker. It was incredible. But one of the speakers was also Cindy Gallup, and she talked about that. And I learned so much. I admit that there's a lot to learn, and taking the time to educate yourself as a person who's in a privileged seat and not a person who's living, with the weather changing every day already prior to any of this happening, is just as helpful as you told me it would be. So I thank you for that.
Oh, you're so welcome. And I think it's, listen, there is no ending to the learning. And I think it's important for, everybody to know that there is still education. I have a lot to learn, and I have a lot of books to read, and I have a lot of conversations to have as well. And I think, I truly believe that we will only collectively make change if we can wrestle with and tackle our own individual stuff, and then start to kind of ripple effect, right? One to one. Like, certainly, yes, like doing a Blackout Tuesday on your Instagram is taking a stand and saying something. Circulating on social media, various kind of like social posts and statements does do something, but it can't be the only thing, right? And it's like, we know in advertising, like, you're only as good as the product that you are actually promoting. So like, we would always say, like, well, I can get you to the dance, but then you're on your own, right? If the product is not there. And so again, I think a lot of times we are doing a lot of shouting, and we in marketing love to be loud. Marketing, advertising, creatives, like, we're loud people, and we're getting on. They're like, yes, Black Lives Matter. And that is good. And there is more work to do under that layer, right? And then that's where the spokes come in, right? Because what you might be able to do, there are things like calling congressmen and writing letters and postcards and that kind of stuff that are important. And it could also look like, joining your school board in your town, right? And starting to see if, what kind of U.S. history are we teaching in our school district? And how do we make that a more equitable conversation? And, you know, what is the diversity of the elementary school in your town? Or what is the diversity of your village council? Or what is the diversity of, you know, there are many ways that you can start to impact change that come from the ground up, right? And that don't have to feel like, oh, I need like some sweeping, big, radical change. Now, do we need sweeping, big, radical change? Yes, that is my opinion. And, you know, will I solo create that sweeping, big, radical change? No. You know, right? So there has to be a realization of, you know, knowing that this is long haul work and that changing a system is extremely hard to do. It's like turning the Titanic with a teaspoon because, you know, you're only one person, but maybe if you have a bunch of people with the teaspoon, you actually do start to get some curvature and some change. So it all counts. It all counts, from the big, loud messages and kind of radical statements and putting yourself out there, all the way down to the one-on-one conversations with, like, you know, family. My gosh, everybody's got a racist uncle. Like, everybody does. Talk to racist uncle and be like, wait a minute, like, let's talk more about why you said that, or why you think that, or even what are you thinking about what's going on right now? Because, you know, the great thing that we can all do is to draw people into the conversation, not push people away. And I think that, you know, when we start to, I was just listening to Brene Brown's podcast, and she was talking about shame and how, you know, we can't just keep calling people out for, you know, their bad behavior, which is necessary, right? In some respects, but also, you know, shame kills empathy, and empathy is at the heart of all of this. Is really like, do you see me as a person? Do I see you as a person? You know, and if we can start from that common ground, you know, we can then understand how systemically we have not seen people as equal, right? And so I think that's like that divide that we have now, where it's like generally accepted that you don't want to be racist in 2020. Like, it's generally accepted that you know, I'm not a racist person, or I don't, you know, do X, Y, or Z, or my friends look different. My family even looks, you know, diverse and inclusive. But that doesn't change the fact that we live in a country, and we contribute to systems that were built a long time ago that were not built to be inclusive. Certainly for people of color, certainly oftentimes for women, definitely not for women of color. And so, you know, it kind of goes on. And I think, you know, there's the both and versus the either or conversation of, like, you know, we have to, again, just call people in. Every single crack is an opening. Every crack is an opening, which is something I read this morning in the Book of Awakening, which is by Mark Nepo. Great book if anybody is looking for a good kind of daily spiritual boost. But every crack is an opening. And he's telling this story about the chick who's getting burst from the egg, and how it feels really crappy for that chick, right? You're warm, you're cozy, you've got your food, and then all of a sudden your life is crumbling in on you, and it feels like all this stuff that you knew it is going away, and it's like you have no choice but to kind of like peck your way out of it. So you have to do that work, and that's the phase that we're in right now. Like, we were warm and cozy in our little bubble of denial. Some of us more comfortable than others. Most of us probably who are listening today more comfortable than others, definitely. And then the shell cracked. And now we have a cracked shell, and we're like, everything is broken. This is a mess. What happened to, it's all been a lie. And there's a lot of reckoning that has to come with it. But the beautiful thing is, like, if we do the work, which has to come from the inside, it's not like the mama chick is like cracking open the egg from the outside. It comes from inside. You know, it will break through into a beautiful, abundant light of inclusivity and love and warmth and change. And it will not look like it looks inside of the egg, because it can't look like it looks inside the egg, because that time is gone. And like the last time we talked, you asked me, when are we going to be out of this and kind of back to normal? And it's like, we're not coming out of it. We got to go through it to something else totally different. And, you know, again, that's like the great beauty and the hope. My God, I hope it's different, because what we were doing was not working. So, you know, we have work to do, but I would encourage people to stay encouraged and to stay pecking, keep cracking away at that eggshell, because there is significant and impactful change to be made that we can all each be a part of in our circle of influence. So I'm hopeful.
But you mentioned hope, because whenever you and I talk, I feel so much more hopeful. Like I walk away from these conversations feeling empowered, and like we can collectively turn the ship around, even though it is turning the Titanic around with a teaspoon.
Right.
And I think the chicken and the egg is a perfect analogy. Like there's no going back. So thank you for making me feel hopeful and empowered, and for sharing your wisdom with us again. I appreciate it so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. I so enjoy talking to you, Jessa. And, you know, I hope that everyone is staying healthy and staying safe. And, you know, there's too much negativity and really, really awful. I mean, and there's reasons to be negative because there's awful stuff going on, but we do have the ability to control the energy that we bring to every single space, to every single meeting, to every single conversation. And, you know, the opposite of fear is love. So shine on and let's get to work. We got a lot of work to do.
Me too. Thank you so much, Jill.
Oh, thanks, Jessa. Talk to you.
Bye.